Well, 2024 has come and gone for all of us. And with 2025 beginning, I think it's time to finally sit down and talk about what my favorite games were of last year. Now last year when I did this, I kind of just threw together a bunch of games I really liked and said they were my favorite, ending the list with my top one. And while we're still going to kind of do that for this year, one thing I'm going to change up is at the end, I'm going to do my top 5 games of this year and end with my top 1. It makes it a little more interesting. With that set out on the table, let's get into the video. So this one was a pretty unexpected joy to find and play. As somebody who grew up in the era of hero shooters getting more and more popular and inevitably becoming a more oversaturated genre, I had kinda just assumed Marvel Rivals would just be another drop in the bucket of hero shooters. And I only really wanted to try it due to the fact that its stylization looked downright fantastic, and it had a step up from all the other plastic looking shooters we've gotten. And I'm very happy to say that I was completely wrong about this game. Dozens of characters to pick from, combined with some of the most fun gameplay I've seen in a hero shooter, makes this an absolute treat. It still has the issue other hero shooters do, where you can kind of get burnt out on the very few amount of modes. But outside of that, it's a very fun game that you can sink a lot of time into. Makes me very curious to see what they update the game with. Oh, did someone just say nice? So, like Marvel Rivals, this was not a game I expected to win me over as much as it actually did. I originally only heard about this through the announcement that it was at the Game Awards for Game of the Year. Like many others, I didn't really get why it was there. Like, it was cool to see an indie there, but I also didn't really get, why it was there. I was then gifted the game from a friend on Steam, and it was all downhill from there. I fell into the balatro rabbit hole, and I don't think I'll ever escape. It's honestly such a simple gameplay concept. You get points by playing poker hands. Seems uninteresting when you say it out loud, but then it happens. You get that perfect hand, and your score goes up like crazy. And then you get multipliers over and over thanks to the jokers, with hundreds upon hundreds of chips to get this gigantic number, and then you win the blind. And that's when it clicks, and the addiction begins. It's a game that you pick up for 10 minutes, only to turn into hours and hours of your time being sunk into it. It's like doing crack, not that I would know. What I'm trying to say is, go play balatro, because it's very fun. It's kind of crazy how I'm working on this list, and I can now say that one of the games I really enjoyed last year was a Princess Peach focused 2D platformer. Mainly because I never expected her to get another game again. Last time she had one was the DS one with Super Princess Peach, which by the way, go play that, it's pretty good. Showtime was a fascinating title. I honestly didn't expect to walk away from it enjoying it as much as I did. The idea of using costumes as powers was pretty cool and led to a lot of unique level ideas, my favorite being the ninja stealth sections. Now, is the game perfect? Absolutely not. It can get kind of repetitive in its late game, but it's still more enjoyable than I expected it to be, and I'm very curious to see if Nintendo will be making a sequel to it for the Switch too, as I think there's a lot of potential here for this series. Plus, Peach is a character that could potentially work with her own franchise, instead of just being a playable character in a Mario game. So, while I was making this list, I actually had a realization dawn on me. There weren't really a whole lot of shooters that dropped this year, were there? There's the annual COD title. Helldivers 2 was a surprise hit, despite its controversies kind of damaging its rep a little bit. And who could forget about the biggest unseen hero of them all? Squirrel with a gun. Rest in peace, Squirrel with a gun, you were gone too soon. And while I could spend hours breaking down how that game is a masterpiece that truly deserved the Game of the Year, instead, I'm gonna use this time to talk about Sulaco instead. I picked this up because I assumed it would play like Doom. I mean, when you look at the graphics, you kind of expect it to, but it doesn't. And honestly, after a bit of playing, that's okay, because the game is awesome. I think what won me over the most was its more tactical focus on gunplay. There was much more of an emphasis of mixing together hiding behind cover, blasting enemies to pieces, and kicking dudes to kill them than just duking it out with 20 guys at once as you rip them to shreds. But the gameplay blends together in this really fun and downright satisfying gameplay loop that I highly recommend people try if they get the chance. As long as you can stomach the fact that you're playing as the worst thing to humankind. A cop. It shouldn't be surprising that a remake was able to make it onto this list. I've stated before that it does feel like we're in the age of remakes for video games. Some have been absolutely phenomenal, others ended up kind of missing the mark for many fans of the original. And personally,
I think Persona 3 Reload falls into the didn't miss the mark territory for me. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Frankly speaking, there is an aspect or two of this game that I'm not a big fan of in comparison to the original. I think they kind of butchered it in some areas. That, and they could have actually changed a few things that definitely needed changing, like improving on the social links. But for what it's worth, flaws and all, I still really enjoyed my time with this version of Persona 3, and definitely think it's worth checking out if you were a fan of the original. And since we're on the topics of remakes making it onto this list, from one remake to another, let's get to talking about the Thousand Year Door. Now, I'm a massive fan of the original Paper Mario Thousand Year Door game. It's my favorite game on the GameCube, and arguably one of my favorite games of all time. And when I learned it was finally getting a remake after so many years of it being stuck in stasis, you can bet your sweet bippy I was beyond excited. And once I played it, I was so genuinely happy to see not only all of the love that went into it, but just how high quality of a product it was. So many of the game's best moments and areas are reborn with a level of effort that just puts this big ol' smile on my dumb face. It's always a treat when a game you love gets the treatment it so rightfully deserves. And definitely did it give all the treats it deserved to my boy Hawk Hogan. And it gives me hope that the original Paper Mario formula could one day return to the series. That is what's happening, right? Nintendo wouldn't make me huff this sweet copium any more than I have to if it means we're getting some return to forms, right? So, out of all of the games that came out this year, I think a lot of us can agree that one of its biggest surprises was the appearance of Astrobot. This cute 3D platformer that focused heavily on gameplay and looked insanely cartoonish. Two things that, let's be real here, Sony wasn't really doing all that much of with their games nowadays, as they preferred to focus on their hyper-realistic games that sold very well in the PS3 and 4 era. So it immediately grabbed my attention. Once I got my hands on it, I can see why everybody ended up liking it. Not only is it just a love letter to everything PlayStation has done over the years, from their games to their systems, it's also just a super charming and fun 3D platformer that gives PlayStation the variety it's really needed in an era where, truth be told, that's been kind of gone from its repertoire. It's no wonder it ended up winning Game of the Year, it was just that good of a title. Even if it wasn't my personal pick, we'll be getting to that one later. I'm honestly hoping that with this victory, Sony opens their eyes a bit more and starts making more stuff like this, as it could really help with one of my biggest issues of their modern day library in its lack of visual and game variety. Oh, and since we're on the topic of surprise comebacks, we actually weren't, that was just a segue for what we're about to talk about now. So, I can't be the only one in the room who absolutely didn't expect this series to ever come back, right? After Alpha Dream basically fucking died in the 3DS era, I assumed the series would just never appear again. But lo and behold, here we are. Brothership was released before us all when we needed it the most. And it was a blast and a half. It has its flaws. Oh baby, it definitely has its flaws. Even thinking about some of this game's pacing and gameplay choices are just ugh. But when it gets going, ooh man, does it get going. It also helps that it has a fantastic art style. I really like this new direction they're going with it. And the gameplay is still as fun as it always has been. I really hope that the people behind the new Mario and Luigi games can continue improving, as I see a lot of potential in the series going forward. And I hope that they can only get better and better. Although, considering that this came out around the time Dragon Quest did, and sold for a lot less as a result, who knows? Also, since we're on the topic of Dragon Quest... Man, another remake on this list, huh? At this point, this video is going to be the equivalent of that one Buzz Lightyear meme. Has some weird form of repetition. Whatever, it's my channel, I can do what I want. Plus, this game is great, so, fuck you. Now, Dragon Quest was always a series that I've wanted to get more into. But every time I tried, a lot of stuff just ended up getting in the way. Like other projects, or my greatest opponent of all, pure laziness. But then, the 3 remake finally dropped, and I was like, alright, this is as good a time as any, let's do this. So I picked it up, and you know what? It's fantastic. It looks absolutely incredible, not a shocker when you remember it was made in the greatest art style of all time, 2D HD. And the gameplay itself was top tier, having one of the most unique uses of a job system I've ever seen. And if you know how much I love job systems, this clicked perfectly. I really have been missing out if all of the other Dragon Quest games are on this level of quality. Definitely need to make plans to check out more of them. Till then, all I've got to say about this one is that it's great. So let's move on to another game that, unlike Dragon Quest, was a completely new IP. Going from one of the best looking pixel games of the year to one of the best looking 3D games of this year is certainly some whiplash. I think that's how it worked. Anyway, Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade was just that good of a game, am I right? Well, this game nowadays is known mainly for its controversies and, as the online people put it, gooner bait design. It's personally a lot more than that. It has such a rad gameplay style of fast, responsive combat with a bunch of really cool abilities and some super fun boss fights to make it arguably one of the best action games of this year. And while I do agree that the story and characters could have been a little more interesting, it's still an amazing action game that I recommend any PS5 or later PC owner get. I personally would love to see how this team make a sequel, or maybe a new IP one of these days, especially since they've shown just how solid their first game out of the gate could be. Well, first game that wasn't a gacha.
Still kind of crazy to me that we now live in an era where this year we not only got a Persona 3 remake, but we even got an all-new IP from Atlus in the form of Metaphor ReFantazio, a game that moved away from what Atlus was normally comfortable with and tried something completely new. And I do think there were aspects of it that needed work, mainly in regards to its combat. I genuinely think this is the best story in a video game I've played this year. The battle for the throne against Lewis, who is without a doubt the best villain I've seen from this company, and pretty much all the games I've played this year, was so endlessly engaging that if the game wasn't so long, I probably would have picked it up immediately after beating it and played it through again. Honestly, if its gameplay was a little better, then I probably would have put it in my top 5 of this year, but I think it's good enough where I have it. Not in my top 5, but comfortable in my top 10.
Okay, before anyone says anything, first things first. I know this game technically came out in 2021, but to be honest, controversial here, I don't really consider the Apple Arcade Store a viable game store, so I don't count it. Plus, this is a complete remaster, and they apparently added a lot of cool stuff, so shut up. With that out of the way, Fantasia Neo Dimension is fucking awesome. It really feels like taking a bunch of the old ways of Final Fantasy that we don't see anymore and reinventing them into a new title. I love how it looks, and I especially love how it plays. The ability to aim your attacks and magic to hit multiple enemies is such a cool idea, it leads to really creative strategies during boss fights. It's kind of a shame that this game has been stuck on the Apple Arcade for as long as it has, because if it had dropped on modern consoles, and of course the GOAT Steam, I feel like it could have really been a massive success and opened up the doors for an entirely new series for Square. But it didn't. But hey, at least this remaster is out to show us all what peak looks like. Also, fun fact, I actually got a review code for this game. I'll be dropping that video in hopefully a couple of weeks, so stay tuned until then, because I got a lot to say about it. And with that, we've wrapped up the first part of my favorite games of 2024. So now it's time to talk about my top 5. Man, I could not tell you just how goddamn happy I was that this franchise finally came back after so many years in stasis. If you didn't know, I'm a huge, and I mean huge, Dragon Ball fan. I watched the anime whenever I could, read as much as the manga, and more than anything, played pretty much every single game I could get my grubby little hands on. Usually with my older brother, and ones I enjoyed the most were the Budokai Tenkaichi titles. I can't tell you how many hours I sunk into those games just flying around the arena, having my favorite characters beat the shit out of each other like they were action figures. Unfortunately, after 3, the series died. And while the Raging Blast games were a decent fill-in for it, I still missed those gigantic toy boxes. And lo and behold, when I thought all hope was lost, we got a trailer for Tenkaichi 4, now dubbed Sparking Zero. It brought back everything I had loved about the series tenfold. Gameplay was as fast and chaotic as it had always been, the roster was bigger than ever before now, comprised of nearly 200 characters, with possibly more on the way thanks to DLC. And more than anything, it included my personal favorite aspect, the sparking episodes. What if storylines that completely change the narrative of Dragon Ball depending on what choices you make? I love these kinds of crazy alternate scenarios, and there were tons. Gohan picks up his training in Super after he fights off Frieza. Goku survives against Raditz and as a result, teams up with Vegeta on Earth. Trunks sticking around for the Tournament of Power, and those are just a few of the many you can fight.
They were all so cool, and I really hope this game gets updated again later on to give us more of these. It was a fantastic return to form, and I'm more than happy to call it one of my top 5 games of 2024. Yeah, this is probably still the most underrated game of 2024. It really did surprise me with how much I had ended up enjoying this title, especially since the demo didn't really blow me away when I had played it. Now though, I have no problem calling this one of my Game of the Year contenders. Originally, I had never touched a single Mana game before this. Outside of the bits I had played of Trials of Mana, most of my experience came from my friends 35 Infinite and Matt Kaiser, both talking about it on their channels. Go check them out when you get the chance. They looked cool, sure, but I was too busy with other stuff, Trails brain rot, at the moment. But with Visions coming out that year, I decided that, you know what, fuck it. I'll make it the first Mana game I will beat. And boy, oh boy, this game was so fucking good. Absolutely stellar art direction, incredibly fun combat, and one of the best job systems I've played in a good long while. While I do think certain aspects of the story could have been better, I still have no problem saying that it's probably the single best action game of 2024. And probably my favorite review I wrote last year. I still don't think I've written a single line for a script that tops, "I lost my waifu, so now the world must die-fu." And who knows, maybe one day I'll tackle the rest of the Mana series. Maybe this year, since I did get the Mana collection for Christmas. I don't know, should I? Let me know down below. Another day, another RGG studio game being absolutely peak. What a surprise, am I right? Honestly, it's one of the studios that I wish I had supported a lot sooner, because even at their lowest points, I genuinely can't call any of their games less than maybe a 6 out of a 10, and that's really stretching it. And Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is easily one of my favorite games from them ever. Now, it's definitely got its problems. Certain story and character moments could have been handled better. That romance story at the beginning really needed to be handled better, Jesus Christ. But honestly, in terms of gameplay and pure just fun value, this is probably one of the best in the Yakuza business. They really went all out to improve all of the major gameplay changes they introduced in 7, and I'm so happy they hit the mark on pretty much all of them. It also showed that Ichiban had what it takes to stand with Kiryu as a fantastic protagonist that can carry the series forward. It really makes me curious about what they're going to do with 9. Is it back to Japan? Or is Ichiban about to go on a different part of the world, like maybe Italy, to deal with the mob? Or exploring different parts of America, like New York? The sky's the limit after how good they made exploring Hawaii feel. I don't know, I can't see the future. What I do know is, I'll be there for it day one. Trails being in this top 5 shouldn't be a surprise if you followed me for a while, considering just how much of a fanboy I've become for the franchise as I've gone through pretty much all of it. I actually expected it to be my game of the year. Unfortunately though, it was beaten out by one other title I will talk about in a minute. But just because it didn't make number 1, doesn't mean it wasn't one of the best games I played this year, as this shit was downright sensational. I had always heard talk of how good Daybreak was, and I was kind of worried that it wouldn't reach the hype I had been getting, but I am so happy to see that they were all telling the truth. That's right, I'm praising the Falcom fanbase for this one. Don't expect it to happen again. Not only is the new cast at Arkwright Solutions probably my favorite group in the series, actually beating out the SSS for the first time ever, but the new gameplay additions like mixing hybrid action gameplay into overworld combat was awesome. Every second I spent in this game just made me want more and more out of it. It makes me genuinely excited to pick up the sequel in a couple of weeks, because I really want to see how much they evolve this gameplay. And while I do really want to make it my game of the year, trust me, it is fighting me every second now not to make it number 1. It was beaten out by one other game. It's kind of insane to think that of all of the amazing games that had come out this year, Trails Through Daybreak, Visions, my favorite game out of all of them ended up being a 2D strategy RPG from Vanillaware. But in all honesty, I can't really see anything else beating it because it was the game I definitely loved the most this year. Yeah, the story and the main character weren't really exciting or anything to write home about. The gameplay, art style, level design, and character moments were some of the best I had experienced this year. If you were someone who overlooked this title because you just didn't think it looked all that great, or because for some reason they won't make PC ports, I beg of you to go out and give it a shot. The game is legit amazing. I personally loved every second I was involved in it. It's without a doubt my game of the year. And I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Here's to a great 2025 filled to the brim with more RPG goodness. If you like what you saw here and want to follow along on all my other RPG shenanigans, make sure to like and subscribe down below. Hit the bell for notifications for when my videos come out, and talk a lot in the comments. I'm making this year the year I hit 1K, and I need your help to do it. Also, what was your game of the year? What was the list in general, if you have one? Was it similar to mine? Was it completely different? Leave it down below because I'm very curious. That's all, folks. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time for more RPG content.